Hey there, it's Kat Kinsman, Executive Features Editor at Food & Wine, and this fall, we're launching the new Food & Wine Classic in Charleston with our partners at Southern Living and Travel + Leisure, and we want to see you there. Join us September 27th through the 29th to learn from iconic chefs, share a glass with innovative wine experts, and experience Charleston with one-of-a-kind events. Tickets are on sale now at foodandwine.com/Charleston Classic. That's foodandwine.com/Charleston Classic. See you down in Charleston.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Want to taste a flight of rare agave spirits at Rick Bayless's award-winning Bar Sotano? Or on La Barca Cantina, the storied taco boat touring New York's Hudson River? Or do you want to drink a special lager from the Maine Beer Company? Or how about coffee? Want to start your morning with a Mexican roast from the genius crew at Dark Matter? Well, you can do all those things and support Sacred in the process. Sacred is a not-for-profit that helps improve quality of life in the rural Mexican communities that make heritage agave spirits. We ask Mescalerixes what problems they have, what solutions they imagine to resolve those problems, and what resources they need to enact those solutions. Then we go out and try to find those resources for them. All of those businesses I just mentioned, Bar Sotano, La Barca Cantina, Maine Beer Company, and Dark Matter Coffee, all of them have special offerings on right now that support Sacred. To learn more about these supportive, creative ventures, visit sacredagave.org/fun. That's sacredagave.org/fun, because real fun is also doing real good. I'm Lou Bank.
And I'm Eric Kozlik, host of the Modern Bar Cart podcast.
And this is Agave Road Trip, the critically acclaimed award-winning podcast that helps Green Gags bartenders better understand agave spirits, and
rural Mexico. Take that, Linda. I'm coming for your job.
Oh my God, you're going to steal her Agave Road Trip paycheck. She will never be able to afford beer again. Hey, Eric, you sent me an email exchange that you had had with a PR agency.
Yeah, well, Lou, I know that as a prominent alcohol podcaster, you probably never receive any outreach from PR. So I kind of had to hold your hand through how it works. But yeah, so I got this email, and basically it was, we get informed about all the spirits launches, right? And so this PR agent reached out to me, and it was one of those email head scratchers, because usually, there's something new or interesting about the spirit being launched, gives the PR something to talk about. It justifies their existence.
Or an attempt at something new, oftentimes, right? Yeah.
Right. Something maybe being inflated to come off as more interesting than it is. But this was interesting to me in that this particular spirit, it was a bourbon. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus here, but if you do your research, it'll probably be pretty easy to figure out what brand this is. But we'll call it a non-Kentucky producer of bourbon, although they do source from Kentucky a little bit. And they're launching this product that they're saying is made from entirely out of like this heirloom corn. But it's weird, because what struck me as a little bit contradictory is that they developed an heirloom corn. And I was thinking, I was like, wow, heirloom seems to me, first of all, to have this connotation of being like kind of old and having some regional heritage to it. And I was like, well, first of all, how do you develop an heirloom corn? And then as I, kind of pressed into this a little bit with the PR agent, just asking for some clarification, This person also indicated to me that it was non-GMO, which is like another one of those terms. And so between heirloom and non-GMO and some of the other, kind of associated terms, I was just like, this all doesn't really make all that much sense to me. So I forwarded it to you, and you happen to agree. And now here we are talking about terms.
Yes, which, I think it's a broader issue in that you get word soup on the one hand, where it's hard to understand what these things mean. Even something as simple in the whiskey world as single malt. Most people that I talk to, even the ones who do drink single malt whiskeys, don't really understand what that phrase means. And then you also get, these words that don't mean what they say, but then things that are just compiled together to make something look like it's new, and it's really, like so to use that term, proprietary heirloom corn, right?
Yeah, well, which is interesting, because if you dig into the process, they created a hybrid.
Right. Well, to be fair, like a hybrid's not the same as a GMO. Right? Like
right.
GMO is like you're literally going in and you're using the, what do they call them? Not the tweezers. There's his word for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. To literally splice the DNA. So like, okay, cool. But heirloom to me is the real word here, because there is the word that flags it for me, because there is no legal definition of heirloom.
Right. Well, I mean, here's what I think of when I think of heirloom, right? I think that usually I come across it in the vegetable space, usually with tomatoes and corn, right? Those are the two places where I tend to hear it. And when I think of heirloom...
Why aren't we talking about heirloom cauliflower, for God's sake? Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Some part of me doesn't think that purple stuff is heirloom. But... when I think of it, I think of, especially both in the vegetable garden context and in the distilled spirits context, I think of the value of an heirloom spirit being, or an heirloom, we might call it agricultural product, being that it became isolated from all of the other types of corn or tomatoes or et cetera out there, because it was particularly good at being from that place and growing in those conditions. And that consequently, if somebody in that place grows it and then you either eat it or consume it via the vehicle of a distilled spirit, you're somehow benefiting from the flavor of that place, which is both terroir, but also kind of the culture. People grow these things. And so having that conversation really does put you in touch with history and culture, I think. But when you just take two separate heirlooms, mash them together. Now, granted, they didn't do this in a lab. They did this in a field. They did it by hand. There was no what we might call petri dish manipulation of sure. This. So it's on the up and up in that respect. But what they did is they planted these two fields of heirloom corn next to each other, and then they kind of harvested where the corn blended in, these two varietals blended into one another. They tell this very romantic story about harvesting all these ears of corn, bringing them to their distillery, laying them out in a colorful spectrum, and then picking the part of that spectrum where the interesting proteins of one type of corn were optimized with the benevolent sugar content of another type of corn. And that now they took that and then they, propagated that, and that now is their proprietary heirloom corn. And to me, a couple things. One, that sounds precisely like the process of making a hybrid. And two, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You need enough sugar to distill, and you need some proteins to create interesting compounds in there that will do cool stuff in the barrel. I'm down with all of it. It just sounds a lot like a hybrid, and I think hybrids suffer because Priuses and Labradoodles suck.
Okay, I'm gonna push back hard against the labradoodle sucking. I've never had a dog hug me more than labradoodles hug me. But I think the thing that pushes my buttons in that proprietary heirloom corn thing is phrase is sort of what you said about heirloom means something. It might not legally mean something, but it suggests something to you that's important, that's tied to cultural heritage. To me, heirloom suggests the preservation of biodiversity. And, so I think, whether somebody interprets that word the way I do or the way you do, when you look at the final methods of what they're doing, it doesn't actually qualify as what they're saying they're doing, and it misses all the important stuff, right? Like if what you're trying to do is say, hey, I've got a whiskey here that's going to help preserve biodiversity, say that. We try to shorten, we try to create these short, simple ways of communicating that cause us to miscommunicate, and that's what this feels like to me, which also goes to single malt, which isn't actually a single malt. Right, which goes to still strength and cask strength, which, okay, cask strength actually is a thing, but still strength, well, at what point did you pull it off of the still? Just say you didn't add water. We did not add water after we distilled it,
Well, and I think to your point, have you ever felt like somebody's trying to imply you into liking something or imply you into being afraid of something with these terms? Because for me, like the whole non-GMO thing and the whole heirloom thing, it feels like they're designed to make me have good feelings. But to your point, nothing is being directly asserted. So I don't know. Is there anything in the agave world in particular that kind of gives you that vibe of being people trying to imply you into purchasing something instead of like outright stating why it's good?
Well, the phrase that comes to mind, and they're one of my donors, so like this is not me throwing them under the bus or under the agave road trip truck, but kind of the opposite, in fact. So Del Maguey has been using the phrase single village mezcal for since their inception, I think in 1994. And what they're trying to do feels to me like, I've never had the conversation with them, but it feels to me like what they're trying to do is echo that single malt thing on the Scotch side to say, hey, this is something, special, pay attention, it's single something. But I think it's the irony in it is, most of your mezcal is actually single family. It's not single village, it's single family. And that's sort of the point to the mezcal is it's not always, but so often it's the hand of the producer that really is determining the flavor. So why not just say that?
Yeah, single certainly does. It implies a couple of things. One, it implies purity, and two, it implies scarcity, right? Because if it comes from a single place, then that means that single place has limited resources and can only sustain so much, right? So like there's this inherent implication of like, you got to get your bottle because there's only so many probably. And then, single, the also a purity in this case of terroir. In the case of single malt, maybe it's a purity of agricultural inputs, right? Like we're not even though it's not the case, we're not getting this malt dirty by mixing it with malt from other fields or malt houses or what have you, even though they are. So yeah, there's a lot of implications, and I guess as a consumer, something I crave is just, instead of, I guess, stacking these terms on top of one another, saying like, not only is it heirloom, but it's also non-GMO, and it's also, we're also sourcing our limestone water from here and there. I wish the value proposition would just be a little bit more direct. Like, why do I want this? I guess at a flavor level. Like, why is this more yummy? Why this more yummy, Lou?
I was watching Parks and Rec reruns over the 4th of July week, and one of those last season episodes where Ron Swanson has opened his own construction company, and he called it something like Very Good Construction. Like, oh, that's what you're looking for, right?
Yep.
Instead of telling me that it's ultra premium, tell me what it is. Instead of saying that it's small batch, tell me the size of the batch. Instead of saying very rare, well, again, how many bottles? What are we talking about here? And again, I recognize that there are all of these shortcut marketing ways to say things. You know, I spent most of my career in sales and marketing, but I think it actually obfuscates the true selling point. We've forgotten the purpose of the sales lines. We just get all caught up in creating these new phrases, proprietary heirloom corn.
Well, and isn't the story that I kind of gave you secondhand of this development, like, kind of cool? Like, it's kind of sexy. It took them a long time to put this corn together. And I think there's a great opportunity for education to say, like, listen, I bet you've never had to ferment and distill corn, but let me tell you, more sugar makes it easier and more protein makes it more interesting. And it took us a long time to dial that in with our hybrid corn that we hybridize between two different. And again, now we're using that word that, that culture has told us is not sexy because of Priuses and insert dog breed that, well, I think you love all dog breeds, but I think you get my drift.
It's funny. Chihuahuas actually bother me, which is ironic given how much I love dogs and how much I love Mexico. But, there you go.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So I guess our message then is Eric, is what? Hey, PR people, just tell us what it is. Hey, marketing people, just tell us what it is.
I think it's tell us what it is, and maybe put the story before the buzzword, because I think one thing I try to do as a spirits educator and as somebody who puts out content about spirits and cocktails is I try not to talk down to people. And when you just slap these buzzwords, it feels like you don't have time for me to really convey the true value of what you're trying to say. So I think if it's worth saying, it's worth not talking down to people in the process. And I think maybe that's where we'll all land on this is, if your buzzwords end up making people feel like they're, being talked down to or reduced to like a KPI of like, or a target audience as opposed to somebody who's curious about how bourbon is made, then maybe that's the wrong thing.
And I think my conclusion is that if you're going to send me a press release like that, just put it in the collar of a Labradoodle and send it over that way.
With a big old curly hypoallergenic hug.
Oh, God bless him. Okay, Eric, I think with that we can call this a wrap.
Hasta pronto.
Hey, you can steal from Linda. That's me.
All right, I'll catch you next time, Lou.
I'll catch you down the road. Thanks, Eric. You've been listening to Agave Road Trip, the critically acclaimed award-winning podcast that helps Gringex bartenders better understand agave spirits, and rural Mexico. We're blessed with sound engineering by Roy Sierra and a theme song performed by Gabriel Oliveira and Marco Ricos. Sign up to become a road tripper and listen to more episodes at agaveroadtrip.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, please let us know. And if you hated it, well, I'm sure you'll let us know that too. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram at Agave Road Trip. Agave Road Trip is a production of 10 Angry Pit Bulls, Inc. Agave Road Trip is powered by Simplecast. Thank you for listening to Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is food radio supported by you. For our freshest content, subscribe to our newsletter. To subscribe to the Heritage Radio newsletter, enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with Heritage Radio Network on Instagram and Twitter at heritage_radio. You can also find Heritage Radio Network at facebook.com/Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization using the power of education
educational storytelling about food to build a more equitable, resilient food system. Heritage Radio Network couldn't do that without support from listeners like you. Become a part of the world's most innovative community today. Subscribe to the shows you like, tell your friends, and please join the Heritage Radio Network family by becoming a member. To become a member of the Heritage Radio Network, click on the beating heart of our homepage. Heritage Radio Network can become addictive. Programming you hear on Heritage Radio Network might lead you to eat, drink, and listen to more programming on Heritage Radio Network. If you drink, please do not drink and drive. Drink responsibly, drive responsibly, eat responsibly too, and listen to Heritage Radio Network responsibly. To listen to Heritage Radio Network responsibly, wear protective earbuds. While wearing protective earbuds, do not drive, do not walk either. Sit in a comfortable chair. If that comfortable chair has a hard seat, please remember to stretch every 30 minutes. If you stretch every 30 minutes, please stay within your defined stressing capacity. And consult a doctor who specializes in stretching. If you don't have a doctor, maybe Dr. Ryan Acock, the Cocktail MD, can help you out. Thanks for listening.
Agave Road Trip out.